Look closely at this video. You are witnessing a Russian drone in flight, soaring through the gray sky, when suddenly and without warning, it simply drops. There is no explosion, there is no sound, and there are absolutely no visible signs of what exactly transpired in that terminal second. When this footage first leaked onto the internet in March 2026, analysts and military observers were left in a state of bewilderment because no one could explain what had neutralized the craft. There was no missile trail, no interceptor drone, and absolutely nothing visible to the naked eye. This is where the story shifts from a mere battlefield incident into a revelation about the changing nature of modern conflict. Because the force that brought down this drone did not come from the present as we know it, but rather from a technological future that many thought was still decades away. Ukraine has just proven that this future has arrived. And in this comprehensive report, we will examine this revolutionary weapon, why it has given the Russian military command profound reasons for concern, and most importantly, how it solves one of the most pressing and expensive problems of contemporary warfare. To understand the gravity of this development, we must look back to February 10, 2026, when journalist Simon Schuster of the American magazine The Atlantic was escorted to an isolated, empty field deep within Ukrainian territory. The conditions were harsh, the air was biting cold, and the sky hung low and heavy with a dull gray shroud. In the middle of this wilderness stood a single pickup truck, and mounted upon its bed was a device that Schuster later described as looking like an amateur astronomer's telescope, flanked by two sophisticated cameras on either side. A test drone was launched into the air, ascending and flying several hundred meters away from the vehicle. On a signal, the operator gave the command to open fire. There was no noise, not even a hum, and no beam of light pierced the air. There was no explosion at the moment of impact. Instead, the drone simply began to smolder and burn in midair, as if it had been struck by an invisible bolt of lightning. Within seconds, the craft was engulfed in flames and tumbled to the frozen earth below. What was demonstrated that day is a system known as Sunray, a cutting-edge laser defense mechanism that is compact enough to fit entirely within the trunk of a standard civilian car. The design allows it to be mounted on virtually any vehicle in a matter of minutes, providing a mobile and modular defense capability. The cameras positioned on the sides of the unit automatically detect and track targets with high precision, requiring only a final confirmation from the operator to engage. Once the trigger is pulled, the target is neutralized in seconds. The brilliance of Sunray lies in its operational physics. The laser focuses an immense amount of thermal energy into a microscopic point on the drone's surface. This concentrated heat either melts the internal circuitry or burns through the structural integrity of the device, causing an immediate loss of control. The result is a clean kill with no flying shrapnel, no risk of collateral explosions on the ground, and crucially, no thermal or visual trace that reveals the location of the shooter. But there is a specific detail that makes Sunray truly unique and distinguishes it from any other system currently deployed on the global battlefield. In recent months, Russia has increasingly relied on a specific type of drone that was previously thought to be invincible against electronic warfare. These are fiber optic drones. Unlike traditional UAVs, these machines do not rely on radio signals or GPS coordinates to navigate. Instead, they are piloted through an incredibly thin physical cable that connects the operator directly to the drone. Because there is no wireless signal to jam, traditional electronic warfare equipment designed to block transmissions is rendered completely useless. The only way to stop such a drone is through physical destruction, specifically by severing the connection. This is precisely where the Sunray system excels. Combat footage released in March 2026 confirms this specific application. The weapon is used to burn through and snap the fiber optic cable connecting the Russian drone to its pilot. Once the cord is cut, the drone instantly loses its command link and falls. There is no explosion and no sound, leaving the Russian pilot on the other side of the link staring at a black screen, likely without any understanding of why their craft just vanished. For the Russian forces, this represents a terrifying paradigm shift. Their drones simply stop responding without any sign of attack or any way to trace the source of the interference. It is like fighting an invisible enemy. This psychological impact is just as potent as the physical one, as Russia currently has no effective countermeasure for this technology. Behind the development of the Sunray system is a man named Pablo Ilizarov, and his personal journey reflects the broader story of how Ukraine has managed to achieve in 2 years what other nations struggled to do in decades. Ilizarov was not a career military officer or a defense scientist. He was a successful entrepreneur and a prominent television producer whose studio produced one of the most influential political programs in the country. When the full-scale invasion began in February 2022, he did not flee. He went to a recruitment center, took up a rifle, and began to build a defense capability from the ground up. Using his own personal funds, he began to form and equip a specialized combat group. He transformed his former television studio into a makeshift factory for combat drones, convincing his professional network and friends to join the effort. The scale and seriousness of his work eventually caught the attention of the United States government, which began providing specialized equipment and support. Under his leadership, the group grew beyond all expectations. According to Ukrainian government sources, the team Ilizarov built has been responsible for the destruction of over $12 billion worth of Russian military hardware. Statistically, 1 out of every 5 Russian tanks destroyed during this war was neutralized thanks to the direct actions or technology of his group. However, the path was not without catastrophe. In a single night, a coordinated Russian drone strike set his primary manufacturing facility ablaze. Everything he had built, including nearly $35 million worth of advanced equipment, was reduced to ash and rubble. Rather than giving up, Ilizarov started over. His resilience led to a pivotal moment in January 2026, when President Zelensky appointed him as a deputy commander of the Ukrainian Air Forces. His mission was clear and incredibly ambitious: to create a comprehensive drone shield that would cover the entire nation. Initially, Ilizarov was hesitant, believing the timeline to be unrealistic given the technical hurdles. It was a direct challenge from the Minister of Defense that changed his mind. The minister told him that he could either sit in the stands and criticize the players on the field, or he could step onto the field himself and show the world what he was capable of doing. Ilizarov chose the latter. When later asked how Ukraine could outpace much wealthier nations in technological development, Ilizarov pointed to a fundamental difference in motivation. He noted that while many Western defense companies are driven by profit and see their work as a standard professional obligation, for Ukrainians, the driving factor is the necessity of survival. This phrase carries immense weight when considering the reality of the conflict. It represents Ukrainian cities that spent entire winters without electricity or heat because the power grid was dismantled by swarms of drones. It represents civilians who have lived for years with the constant psychological burden of air raid sirens and the knowledge that a cheap, mass-produced drone could strike at any moment. Sunray is therefore more than just a technical achievement. It is an existential response from a nation that cannot afford to wait for traditional development cycles. When you compare the Sunray project to international benchmarks, the disparity is staggering. For instance, the United States Navy's primary laser system was developed by Lockheed Martin with investments exceeding $350 million over several years. Despite this massive capital injection, it resulted in only one operational system installed on a single warship. Furthermore, in March 2026, the United States Army announced the termination of its most advanced laser program, citing it as too expensive and overly complex for practical deployment. Similarly, the United Kingdom's Dragonfire system received over £416 million in investment. While it is an impressive piece of engineering with an incredibly low cost per shot, it is not expected to enter official service on British warships until 2027. In contrast, the Ukrainian Sunray was developed for a fraction of that cost, totaling only a few $1,000,000. It is portable, it is battle-tested, and it is already being used in active combat zones. This suggests a massive shift in who is leading the global arms race in directed energy weapons. The situation has become so critical for Russia that unconfirmed reports suggest they have been forced to look toward Chinese laser technology in an attempt to keep pace with Ukrainian indigenous engineering. While the world watches, a silent rearmament is taking place globally. Israel, for example, accelerated its Iron Beam project after using early versions against Hezbollah drones, putting its 100,000-watt system into full operation by December 2025. The United Kingdom has recently signed a £316 million contract to bring Dragonfire to its fleet, and Australia has already begun exporting its own laser systems to the Netherlands and South Korea. The race is undeniably on, but Ukraine is unique in that it is building its own technology from zero while under constant fire, whereas others remain dependent on foreign acquisitions. President Zelensky's strategic vision for this technology is organized around a strict deadline: a functional nationwide shield by the summer of 2026. The logic of this plan is based on economic efficiency. Lasers like Sunray are designated to handle the closest and cheapest threats, such as small surveillance and kamikaze drones. Mid-level threats are to be intercepted by specialized drone-on-drone systems, while high-end Western missiles like the Patriot are reserved strictly for the most dangerous and complex ballistic or cruise missile attacks. By using the right tool for each specific threat level, Ukraine ensures that its most expensive resources are not wasted on targets that a laser can neutralize for pennies. While the timeline is tight, Ukraine has a proven track record of compressing years of development into months. An even more surprising turn of events occurred in February 2026, when for the first time since the invasion began, Ukraine started selling its own domestically produced weaponry to other nations. A country that was once solely a recipient of international aid has now become a high-tech supplier. In March 2026, President Zelensky traveled to the Middle East to sign defense cooperation agreements with Saudi Arabia and Qatar, with ongoing negotiations reported with the United Arab Emirates. International interest is surging, particularly from countries seeking effective defenses against Iranian-manufactured drones. The Ukrainian battlefield has effectively become the world's most advanced laboratory for anti-drone warfare, and the lessons learned there are now a valuable export commodity. The technological evolution of Sunray is continuing at a rapid pace. The system already utilizes artificial intelligence to automatically identify and track targets, but the next phase of development involves full autonomy. Engineers are working to allow the weapon to make its own firing decisions without the need for a human operator to confirm each shot. When this level of automation is achieved, the reaction speeds will be beyond human capability, fundamentally changing the defense equation. For years, the math of this war favored the attacker, as it was cheap to attack and expensive to defend. Sunray flips that script, especially against the fiber optic drones that Russia believed were a silver bullet. At this moment, the Russian military lacks a concrete answer to this threat, giving Ukraine a tangible technological edge. This is the first time a directed energy weapon, developed under the duress of active war with minimal funding by a secret team of engineers, has proven its worth in high-stakes combat. In the 1980s, American President Ronald Reagan dreamed of a laser-based defense system and invested billions into what was then called Star Wars. Yet, he never saw it fully realized. Major world powers spent decades trying to build what Ukraine demonstrated in a frozen field in 2026 on the back of a pickup truck. They succeeded not because of superior funding or more time, but because they had no other choice but to innovate to survive. This technological milestone marks a new chapter in the conflict, one where the speed of thought and the precision of light are the new